thing that we're going to go through today is some general like punctuation tips, tricks, rules. We're going to actually we're going to skip over some of the less important things, and we're going to start with commas. So within the rules of the SAT, there's 6 main comma rules that everything for the SAT follows. So for example, let's say our first one is what's going to be here on the screen. Oh, and someone said, should I take notes? Yes, I would highly suggest to take notes. Let me see if I could, anyone can view. I could copy the link. Not sure if this is going to work, but I could try to send that to you guys as well, so you guys have access. Not sure if that worked. Oh, I just sent it to private. Let me send it to everyone. Okay, so there I just sent the link for this to everyone. So if you guys would like to take notes, I definitely suggest that, just because by the muscle memory of writing the notes, it definitely helps out. But if you don't want to and you just want to follow along with us, that's absolutely perfect as well. All right, so here we're going to go through the comma rules. Let me just make sure that I got my pen, the annotations. Okay, can you guys see that if I write on the screen? Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's take a look at our first rules. So for the commas, we're going to have 6 different rules. The very first rule is going to be a list. So if you have 3 or more items, you're always going to put a comma between those items. So for example, here, you said I had bagels, eggs, and bacon for breakfast. So bagels, eggs, and bacon for breakfast, that is going to have a comma between all of those items in the sentence. Now a list, it has to be 3 or more items. If it's less than 3 items, it doesn't count as a list. So if, let's say, I skipped out on the eggs and I just said I had bagels and bacon for breakfast, now essentially there's no need to put a comma anywhere within this sentence. You would just say bagels and bacon for breakfast, and that is absolutely fine. So that's going to be our very first rule. Now our second rule is going to be something that's called 2 adjectives describing the same noun. So the 2 adjectives that are describing the same noun are something that looks like this. There was a huge, beautiful mural on the wall. So huge and beautiful. Notice those are something that's called an adjective. Now an adjective is essentially just a word that is describing something in the sentence. So notice here that the word huge describes the mural, and beautiful also describes the mural as well. So since those 2 words are descriptive words, that's what makes them an adjective. So when I have 2 or more adjectives, they are describing the same mural, that's where I'm going to put a comma in between them. So that's our second rule. Now our next rule is going to be something that's called additional information. So additional information is simply, there's 3 different types. The first one is additional information at the beginning of the sentence, and that's going to look like this. It's going to be an introductory phrase. So an introductory phrase is something like, therefore, he was not very happy with the outcome. Notice how therefore is just introducing the sentence. It doesn't need to be there in the sentence. I could cross it out and just say, he was not very happy with the outcome, and that works absolutely fine. So since it works absolutely fine, that's how you know that it's additional information. You could essentially just cross it out from the sentence and it works well. So notice here we could also have it in the middle of the sentence. It's almost like using parentheses around something. You could say, my mother, who is a chef, prepared a delicious cake. And have you ever read a book where, let's say, there's 2 parentheses around something, and you just skip over whatever's inside the parentheses. You just say, my mother, oh, prepared a delicious cake. Maybe you get lazy and don't want to read what's in there, or maybe you know that it's not as important. Now, that's exactly what we could do here. We could cross this out and say, my mother prepared delicious cake, when we have 2 commas around it. And that's what's going on with this additional information. Now, our third one is going to be at the end of the sentence. Going to look something like this, where you said, Sally went to the beach, comma, which had a lot of tourists. Notice here, which had a lot of tourists, that is the additional information. So in this case, the additional information is the therefore. Here, the additional information is the chef. and then the additional information is going to be which had a lot of tourists. So notice there we have 3 parts of additional information. All of them work within the sentence, and all of them you can delete from the sentence. Here I could have deleted this, here I could have deleted this, and in this case, I could have deleted this as well. Right, so far those are the first 3 rules. Anyone have any questions on those first 3 rules? Right, perfect. So now that we took a look at those first 3, there's 3 more rules. And again, feel free to ask questions as you go. So our 4th rule is something that's called the fanboy. Now, fanboys are super, super important to remember because they come up in a lot of other topics later on too, but they stand for this. So it spells out for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So notice the first letter of each one spells out our fanboys. Now, what's so important to remember is the fact that in this, we have 2 complete sentences on either side of the fanboy, and that makes it necessary to have a comma. But the moment that we don't have a complete sentence, now there's no reason to put the comma. So for example, let's take a look at this first one here. So we have, I went to the mall and bought a video game. So we have to just simply check, is it additional, or not additional information, is it a complete sentence? Now there's 2 main things to check for a complete sentence. One is the subject. 2 is the predicate. So the subject is simply just going to be what the sentence is about. The predicate is essentially the action that it's doing. So the action is whatever the thing that it's about is doing. So let's take a look at this one. We have, I went to the mall, comma, and I bought a video game. So notice here, what do you guys think is the subject? Feel free to just type it in the chat. What do you guys think is the subject of this example sentence that we have here? Anyone have any thoughts on what the subject might be here? Awesome, perfect, I. So awesome. See a bunch of people saying I. So here is the subject. All right, and don't feel shy when I ask questions. Feel free to just type in the group chat. Even just send it directly to me if you feel uncomfortable sending it out to everyone. All right, now what's the predicate? Anyone have any ideas on what the predicate is? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so some people are saying bought, some people are saying the mall, some people say went and bought, and that's a great answer, went and bought. Because notice here, went to the mall, that is my entire predicate. Now notice if you said went and mall or bought or something like that, bought a video game is a whole nother action, which is a whole nother predicate. And I is a brand new subject as well. So now what just happened there is I have 2 complete sentences. I got my subject and predicate here, and I got my subject and predicate here, which is great because now I have 2 complete sentences. Now, what's the rule though? When I have 2 complete sentences, that's where I put this comma before the fanboy term. And is a fanboy term, so that works great. But take a look at this next example. We still have I went to the mall, so that there is still a complete sentence. However, bought a video game, that's not complete. I lost the I. Now I only have a predicate. I have no subject anymore. So since this is now not a complete sentence, notice how I put no comma in front of the and. So the first thing for this type of topic is double check and say, do I have a subject? Do I have a predicate? Then after that, well, first step is say, do I have a fanboy? Then say, do I have a subject? Do I have a predicate? If yes, put the comma. If no, then no comma goes. Right? Now our next one here is our 5th rule, which I like to call 2-part sentence. Some people call it dependent, independent clause, but really the big thing to remember is D, comma I, or ID. D standing for dependent, I standing for independent. Now, the reason why it's important to remember that is because of the fact that when you have a dependent clause first, like here, and then an independent clause second, I put the comma. When I have an independent clause first and then a dependent second, now I don't need to put any commas there. Now, what even is a dependent independent clause? So, someone said, wait, I have a question about the last one. I'm sorry. So no big deal. Feel free to just ask a question if you guys have any questions. Just feel free to type it in. I don't mind going back. All right, but here for this one, we have a two-part sentence. So here, a dependent clause is something that is dependent on something else. So when it's dependent, it cannot stand alone. So for example, here we have, if you want to try out for the team. So notice if I told you when I said, if you want to try out for the team, I'll say, okay, if I want to try out for the team, what do I need to do? I don't know the rest of that. So that's what makes it dependent. Because notice like a dependent person is dependent on someone. Maybe if you're dependent, you still rely on your parents or something like that. Same with this. This is dependent on the rest of the sentence. We need the rest of the sentence for it to be okay. However, you must practice every day. That's independent. If I just told you, hey guys, you must practice every day, you'd be like, okay, all right, thanks for letting me know. I need to practice for the SAT every single day. And you still get the whole entire point of what we're talking about. So notice that's what makes it independent. So in this case, this first example is a dependent, comma, independent structure where we have our dependent here, and then you have the comma, and then you have your independent second. However, you could flip-flop these sentences, and you could say, you must practice every day if you want to try out for the team. Now, when you have that conjunction midway through the sentence, that's when you do not need to put a comma, because that conjunction already does that transition for you. So essentially, you don't need to put any punctuation there, right? So before we go back to Rule 4, because I see a question on that, anyone have any questions about Rule 5? Or actually, for that matter, questions about anything else? All right, so let's take a look. What's our question about? Before we said, which version is correct? The sentence without or with the comma? Oh, that's a great question. Both of them are correct. Just when you have a complete sentence on both sides, you must put the comma. When you do not have a complete sentence on both sides, then you do not need the comma. So in this case, both of these are correct. If I changed this and I made this like this, and I had no comma here, but I had the I, now it's incorrect. Because if I have a complete sentence here and a complete sentence here, then I absolutely must need to put that comma in. But if I don't have a complete sentence, that's where it's allowed to have no punctuation. So this here is a correct example, and this here is also a correct example. Just two slightly different structures. However, both of them are correct. Hopefully that answers your question. But if you have any other questions, feel free to follow up. All right, and now our very last comma. Right, we said, so are the terms like placeholders to the commas? What do you mean by which terms? Like the Fanboy terms? Placeholders to the commas? No, because notice in this case, the one with the Fanboy still has a comma. We didn't take out the comma when we put in the Fanboy. So they're not necessarily placeholders, they're completely separate. For this, you have, I went to the mall, comma, and I bought a video game. The comma is just to separate the subjects, because essentially what's going on here is this subject is its subject on its own, and then this predicate is on its own. So that's its whole own sentence. Then I bought a video game is a whole section on its own. So this is on its own, and this is also on its own, which is why we're putting that comma to show that they're distinct two separate sentences. But notice here, I is being distributed to both. I is the subject for this. I is also being distributed to this portion of the sentence. So in that case, I don't need a comma because I don't need to show that they're separated, because they're not separated. It's one sentence altogether. So that's the only thing that the comma is doing here. It's only showing that we distinctly have either two separate sentences or we don't have two separate sentences. Notice that's the only difference here. Here having the and the end, that's the same. Everything else is the same. It just matters if you have a complete sentence on both sides or not. Now, in that case, also one thing that people get confused on here, but is something that is actually really important. So if you're taking notes, I would highly suggest to write this down. There's something called a comma splice, which is something to look out for. And that's when you have two complete sentences without a fanboy term with a comma. So if I still had the sentence and I said, like, I went to the mall, and then I didn't have the and I said, comma, I like bought a game, that is what's considered a comma splice. That is never correct. So make sure that you guys keep that in mind, that commas are only meant to separate multiple portions of like one sentence. It's never meant to separate two complete sentences unless we had that fanboy term. So hopefully that clarifies. If you still have extra questions, feel free to just continue to comment in the group chat, but let me know if that answers your question. Right, and now our next one here is, someone said, for the common splice, would there be any special exceptions to make it grammatically correct? Nope. You never can have a complete sentence, another complete sentence with just a comma in between. Sure, if we have a comma with a fanboy, now go right ahead. If you have a period, go ahead. A semicolon, which we're going to get to that later, go ahead, have those two complete sentences. But we can never have where we just have a complete sentence, another complete sentence, and a comma in between. There's never going to be any exceptions to that. But good question. Good question. Any other questions on that comma splice or that that way of going about things? Okay, good. Glad that answered your question. All right, perfect. So now we just have one other thing, and this is going to be a quote. So a quote is, obviously you guys all know with a quote, but when we're introducing a quote, we have to put a comma before that. So notice here we say, like our English teacher says, comma, we must learn how to use commas. So since we're introducing that quotation, we need to put a comma before it. So notice here, there's essentially going to be 6 different main rules. Every single one of these is going to follow one of these rules. So when you tackle these on the test, instead of just going based off of like, hey, does this sound good? Do I take a pause here in this sentence? Things like that, don't really worry about that more so, but worry about, does it follow a rule? So say, if I put a comma here, is it a fanboy? Is it a quote? Is it a 2-part sentence? Is it, ask yourself those questions and literally run through all 6 of the rules. And then from there, then you'll be able to, get your answer a little bit better. So, so let's go ahead, let's jump into a couple practice problems. Before that, let me just go ahead and make a poll real quick, just so you guys could answer your questions here. But I do want to know how the speed is going. So let me know if we're going too fast, good speed, or you think that the material is too slow. Let me know. I'm going to send out this poll. All right, so I'm going to launch the poll. Let me know, just click on the poll. Let me know the speed of the class, if you think that it's a good speed, or if I'm going too fast for anyone, just because I want to make sure that everyone's retaining the material that we're walking through. Okay, perfect. So it looks like most of you guys answered. It looks like out of the 18 people that answered, we got 16 were at a good speed, one said too fast, and one said too slow. So we'll try and keep it at the same speed that we're going to. Oh, we got another one for good speed. So we'll try and keep it at the same rate. If you do feel that I'm going too slow and you want to keep yourself busy during the time, what I suggest is log on to that online learning platform that I gave you. Do some practice problems of what we're discussing. So let's say we just discussed commas, log on and do some practice problems. Just have me in the background, talking through some of the material. If we are going too fast on the flip side, feel free, definitely message me in the group chat. Feel free to verbalize. If you have any questions, I absolutely don't mind going through them, as well as after the class, use the time to use also that online learning platform to reinforce. Everything that we just went through in the comma section is on that online platform. All you have to do is click on the video, practice, run through those questions, also run through the recorded lectures there, as well as I did give out the email at the beginning of the class, but if you have any additional questions, you could always feel free to reach out to after. But all right, so that's good to know. Just wanted to make sure that we were going at a good speed for everyone. So now we're going to go ahead and do some additional practice. So let me Okay, so I'm gonna launch the poll now for some practice problems. So let's do a couple practice problems to run through. So why don't we give this one a shot? I'm gonna relaunch this poll and let me know what you guys think for the answer. Actually, hold on. So far, the answers are looking pretty good. Someone said they can't see the question. Let me try for the next one. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger or try making it bigger on your screen. Also, someone else said that the poll disappeared after they tried moving it. Don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Try and just join in on the next poll if you can't see it, or feel free to just type in your answer to the group chat. Either is fine. Just, as long as you're participating, that's all that I really care. Someone also asked the rules for the semicolons. Hang tight real quick because we're going to get to that after the commas. And if I don't answer your question after that point, then we'll dig into that a little bit deeper. All right, so I'll give you guys 2 minutes for that. So I'll end the poll. I'll show the results to you guys so you could see. So most of you guys chose B, which is awesome for that. A couple chose C and D, so let's go ahead and see which this is the correct answer. So the correct answer here is going to be B. Now let's take a look at why. So to make it a little bit bigger, hopefully you guys could see it now. So the big thing that we want to look at is simply what's our rules? So the semicolon, sure, we haven't talked about that just yet, but we could even answer this question without that. So notice this word because. That's a huge red flag. Now, the word that or the reason that because is a huge red flag is simply because of the fact that, remember those two-part sentences that we discussed? So it's like, because this happens, that happens. Or if this happens, that happens. When that happens, that happens. Even after that happens, that happens. That's that dependent, independent clause that we talked about. So right when you see that word because, automatically you could say, oh, I know it's going to be a comma because it's this happens, comma, that happens. So right away, I could then say, okay, B is probably going to be my correct answer. Now, let's just say, all right, maybe we thought, why couldn't D be our correct answer? Simply because of the fact that it has a comma as well. Well, D cannot be our correct answer because notice all of these, it's not like because this happens, therefore that happens, or so this happens. Just because this happens, that happens. So considering that, that's why we want to choose B as our correct answer for that one. All right, so let's try a couple more, just so you guys could put this into application. So we got, let's see, let's skip that one. Let's do, yeah, why don't we do this one? Let me see if I can zoom it in for you guys that said that you couldn't see it. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that now. I'm going to go ahead and relaunch this poll. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Someone said they can't see the passage. Is anyone else having that issue? If you're having the issue where you can't see the passage, maybe try to rearrange your screen a little. Someone said move the poll. It's usually in the way. For me, I actually don't have access to move the poll. It always puts the poll right in the middle of the screen. Same with yours. I think it just automatically puts it in a place in the screen. So maybe try moving things around in other spots on the screen. But for some reason, I personally don't have access to move where the poll is located. And someone said that they don't see the poll. You don't see the poll, again, no big deal, no worries. Just feel free to just pay attention and go along with the material that we're going through. Oh, perfect. Someone said if you can't see the passage, try closing the chat bar. Maybe that'll help for some of you guys. I know on each screen it's different where the locations are. So hopefully you guys can figure it out. All right, so looks like most of you guys chose B, which is great. A couple chose C, D. So let's take a look at these. So here, the correct answer is going to be B. And now let's take a look at why. What rule are we following? So simply this is going to be B. The reason is because we have additional information. So the additional information, remember, you could always take it out from the sentence. You could always delete it. So let's take a look and see if we could delete this one. So if I delete everything in between, such as weather and altitude, and I say a goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which along with other environmental factors shapes the cheese's taste and texture. Oh yeah, that works. So notice right there, once that works, it says, okay, it's definitely additional information, and I could go with B as my correct answer. Now, if I chose any of the other ones, like A, It wouldn't work because anytime you have the additional thought, you kind of interrupt that own thought in your own sentence. You have to put the commas around it. Same with C. There's no reason to put those two commas because simply if I take that out, it wouldn't work in the sentence. For example, here, if I said, a goat ingests vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which along with other environmental factors, such as shapes, the cheese's taste, and texture. Notice how that doesn't work, just taking out the altitude and weather. Same with D, if we just have the comma right there after such as, there's again no reason. This doesn't show additional information, doesn't show a fanboy, a quote, additional or a two-part sentence, anything like that. So since there's no reason to put the comma, you simply just won't go with it. All right, so let's keep moving forward. Let's try a couple more. So that one, let's try speed. Let's do okay. All right, let's try this one as well. Someone said, would the commas go around the additional information? Yes, commas always go around additional information on both sides if it's in the middle. If it's just at the beginning of the sentence, then you just put a comma after it. Just like the example we went through that said therefore, you have therefore and then a comma and then the rest of the sentence. And then if it's at the end of the sentence, then I just put a comma before the additional information. Oh, someone said, can you zoom in on the question? Yes, hopefully that is better. Perfect. So far, the answers look great for this one. Give you guys like 30 more seconds. Give you guys 2 minutes. All right, perfect. So let's end the poll. So it looks like 93% of you guys said B, and awesome, you guys are correct. B will be our correct answer here. So again, let's take a look why. This adds on to the additional information that we were talking about before. If we said, luckily the tower survived and its tilt has made an Italian icon. So for this, the Italian icon, we're adding more additional information about the Italian icon, saying that it's attracting visitors from all over. So that's why a comma and then the additional information after would be perfect. Now keep in mind, make sure you guys mute yourself if you come on in. So here, if we have the additional information, then you're going to put the comma before it. So again, we're going to go through these semicolons just in 1 minute. But the reason why it can't have like A or C is simply because of that comma splice that we talked about. If we say it attracts visitors, then notice how that would not work well because this first half is a complete sentence. Also, this second half is also a complete sentence. Remember, anytime you have 2 complete sentences, you never can have the comma in between, which is why in this case, these would not be correct and B would be our correct answer. Right, so just keep that in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and try a couple more in regards to the semicolons now. All right, so here are the semicolons. The main idea here is essentially what you see right here. The rule is I must have a complete sentence before the semicolon and I must have a complete sentence after the semicolon. So that's the big thing that you want to remember for the semicolons. Now, when you really think about that, the semicolons are essentially exactly the same as a period. Because a period, I need two complete sentences on both sides, and a semicolon, I now need two complete sentences on both sides as well. So that tells me that periods are interchangeable with semicolons. Now, in the real world, rather than like just the SAT world, they're not exactly interchangeable, but the SAT doesn't test on these two little details that I'm going to mention, but it's still good to know just in case for, personal essays or statements or something like that. It's important to remember. So the semicolon, the two sentences must relate to one another. However, for a period, the two sentences do not have to relate to one another. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here we have an example, and again, this is a correct example, where we said, the chips were so delicious, semicolon, I ate the whole bag. So let's take a look. We need to have a complete sentence. So a reminder, what are two things that make a complete sentence? We have our subject and our predicate. So gotta find my subject and predicate. So my subject is the chips. What are the chips doing? They are being delicious, which is my predicate. Got a new subject, I. What is I doing? Eating the whole bag. So all right, that's my predicate there. So now in this case, now the chips are so delicious is a complete sentence. I ate the whole bag is complete sentence. So I fixed my two rules. So since I matched up with my two rules, I know a semicolon works. Now watch what happens when I change this. Let's say I have, the chips are so delicious, and then I said, the sky is blue. Notice how that has absolutely nothing to do with one another. So if it has nothing to do with one another, semicolon is not an option, and period is our only possible answer. So just remember the semicolon, they have to relate to one another. The period, they do not have to relate to another. That's the only big difference between them. But as I mentioned on the test, they don't test that. So if, let's say, you have an answer choice A, B, C, and D, you got a period, you got a semicolon, you got a colon, and let's say, I don't know, you have like no punctuation. In that case, I could automatically cross off A and B and say those are not your correct answers. Why? Because they're the same thing. So if they're testing the same thing, that they're having a complete sentence on both sides, then automatically I could eliminate both of them. It's just like having a math question and having like A, B, C, and D, and having 5, 5, 6, and 7. Well, if 5 was correct, then A and B technically would be my correct answers, but I can't have two correct answers on the test, therefore those are going to be out. So basically the same concept, use this trick to help you narrow down your answers to just make sure that you're going based off of the correct content. All right, so this is the main concept here. So let's go ahead and try a couple practice problems in regards to this main concept. Actually, you know what? Let's go over, before we go over some practice problems, let's do the colons and dashes, and then we'll do practice problems of them all. So for the person that asked me earlier about semicolons, hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to type in and just let me know if that answers your question. If not, feel free to ask any follow-ups as well. All right. So let's go ahead, let's jump into the colons. So again, the colons are going to have one major rule. And that major rule is what you see here on the screen. So the rule is before the colon needs to be a complete sentence, and after the colon must be an explanation. Now that explanation could be a fragment, a complete sentence, a list, a definition. Essentially, it can be any structure whatsoever. It does not matter the structure. So in this case, a common misconception is that it has to be a list. People say, oh, anytime it's a list, it's going to be a colon. But take a look at a sentence like this. If I say, I don't know, let's say my favorite colors are colon, blue, green, and pink. How many of you guys think that this is correct and how many think it's incorrect? Feel free to just type it in the group chat. Let me know if you think it's a correct way of using a colon or an incorrect way of using the colon. Make sure you're looking at the rules as you answer this question. So I'm seeing a lot of corrects, but take a look at the rule. What's our first rule? Our first rule is a complete sentence. Let me know, is my favorite colors are a complete sentence? What do you guys think? My favorite colors are. Do I have that subject and predicate? Perfect. Yeah, so I'm seeing some no's. So if we answered no to that first, yet we answered yes to a colon, those don't line up with one another. We got to say my favorite colors are. Do I have a subject? Do I have a predicate? I have a subject. I'm talking about my favorite colors, but what are my favorite colors doing? I have no clue. There's no action there. So since there's no action, now it's not going to be a complete sentence. So right there at that point, when I say that this is not a complete sentence, I can't use a colon. I don't care if I have a list. I don't care if I have any of these portions over here. It does not fit both rules. It has to fit both rules for it to be correct. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you a couple examples, but hopefully that example there kind of put it in perspective to you guys that just because it's a list does not mean that it's correct using a colon. You have to go based off of the rules that we established right here on our screen. So let's take a look at this. So our first one correctly does what we just tried to do in the previous one. Here we say, my favorite colors are the following: blue, green, and pink. Now that accurately does what we were trying to do. Because my favorite colors, that there is my subject. Now what are they doing? They are coming to follow. Now I have a predicate. And then blue, green, and pink, that's my explanation. And it's an explanation how? Oh, because you ask a question based off of the first half. You say my favorite colors are the following. Oh, well, what are your favorite colors? You kind of question it. Oh, now we answer it. Now what about this next one? Notice how this next one doesn't have a list, but it's still correct. So if you said he got what he worked for, colon, a promotion, that is also going to be correct because he got what he worked for, he is my subject, got what he worked for is a predicate. What did he work for? You ask yourself a question. He worked for a promotion. Well, that's my explanation of what he worked for. You know what to do, colon, practice. Taking a look at this next one. You as a subject know what to do is our predicate. And then we have, what do you need to do? Oh, well, we answered that. Here's our explanation practice. Now our next one, we said, I did not have enough time to do my math homework, colon, I had a huge English project due, which was my top priority. So notice in this case, I have my subject, did not have enough time to do my math homework. That's now my predicate. Now, why did you not have enough time to do your math homework? Because I had a huge English project due, which was my top priority. Notice again, that's my explanation. Now, sometimes people say, well, for this last one, can't we use just a period or a semicolon? Yeah, so someone actually asked that. Can we do a semicolon here? And yes, we can. Sometimes the rules overlap with one another just because of different reasons, not because they're interchangeable, just simply because they happen to interchange. In this case, because we happen to have two complete sentences. So it could work to have a semicolon here. It could work to have a period here. We could even have a comma and a fanboy conjunction here. There's so many different ways that we could go about this sentence. The only one that though we cannot do is a comma, because remember that would create a comma splice. But we could use any of these other types of punctuation for this sentence. They're never going to ask you on the test which one is better than another, unless you are taking the ACT. Then they would ask which one is not acceptable. It might have a period, a semicolon, a colon, and like no punctuation. And then you have to recognize that in the sentence, all three of these could work interchangeably. Therefore, no punctuation would be our correct answer. But that's only for the ACT test. If you're taking the SAT, don't even worry about what I just said there. So this is a bunch of examples of the colons. So anyone have any questions on any of these? Okay, perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and clear this. All right, so we got one more topic. So I just want to run through this last one, M dash. Then I'll give you guys just like a 3-minute break or whatever if you want to run, get a drink, grab a water, something like that, or go use the restroom. But let's just go through M dashes, then we'll take like a 3-minute break and then go into a bunch of practice problems. So here we got M dashes. So M dashes, it pretty much just shows additional information. Now, additional information we've already spoken about multiple different times. There's the colon for additional information. There's the parentheses, the commas. There's so many different things for additional information. So yes, we do have another third way or fourth way for additional information. But let's take a look at what they do. So we have 3 rules here. Now, even though it seems like a lot of rules for one type of punctuation, it only supplements previous things that we've spoke about. It's not anything new. So if you understand everything that we've talked about thus far, this should be okay for you. So rule number 1 is 2 M dashes can replace 2 parentheses. 2 M dashes can also replace 2 commas, as well as 1 M dash can replace 1 colon. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like. So our first 2 rules are going to look something like this. So let's take a look at this one. We said Mary made sure to edit the mistakes, all 32 of them, before publishing her book. So notice here, we have all 32 of them. All 32 of them is additional information, just like we mentioned with the parentheses. So considering that, here, we could also substitute it in with 2 commas, and that could show additional information too. Now, we mentioned that it could replace 2 parentheses and 2 commas, so watch what I did here in this last sentence. I still have the same one. Mary made sure to edit the mistakes, all 32 of them, before publishing her book, but now this is also additional information, but now I have 2 dashes around it. So those are the M dashes. They're kind of like elongated little dashes. If you're going to type it on the computer, you actually put 2 dashes together, and then it forms this kind of longer dash. So if you do ever want to use it in your own writing, that's kind of how you go about it. But notice all 3 of these are interchangeable. Now again, to have things that are interchangeable, they're not going to ask you which one is better than the other, but what they will do is, let's say they chose this as your original sentence, and they had this portion here underlined, and they asked what type of punctuation is it? Is it a parenthesis, a dash, a comma, maybe no punctuation, and we were trying to ask that question, then you have to match the punctuation over here. So if you realize that it is showing additional information and we have a dash on this side, we must have a dash on this side as well. If you see that it's additional information, we have a comma, then a comma goes, and so on and so forth for a parenthesis. Now, as we mentioned with the previous one, a common misconception is that it has to have a list for a colon. So there's obviously a misconception also about the M dashes. In M dash, people say that we absolutely need to have 2 M dashes, which is wrong. Take a look at this next one. It'll show you why. Remember how we had additional information simply for the fact of a colon. A colon was a complete sentence and then additional information after. So in this case, where we have a colon that can be replaced with 1 dash, it has the same structure. It has a complete sentence, then it has the colon, or otherwise an M dash here, and then it has the additional information, or otherwise the explanation. And that's what's going on in this. We're able to substitute in this colon essentially for that dash. So notice here we don't have 2 dashes because where's the additional information? The additional information is simply at the end of the sentence here, which is why in this case I don't have another dash, because it simply closes the sentence with a period. So remember, M dashes just show additional information. Sure, there's multiple different capacities. We could have it in the form of a colon. We can have it in the form of parentheses. We can have it in the form of commas. So many different types of M dashes, or things that it could replace M dashes, I should say. But there are a bunch of different ways to use this. So far, those are the different types of punctuation that you're going to be tested on for the SAT, as well as if you are taking the ACT. All of these things are going to apply for that as well. So I would highly suggest, we are going to do more practice problems today, but if you find that this topic is a more challenging topic for you on the test, I would highly suggest to simply just go ahead and make flashcards of this. I did send out this PowerPoint to you all, but if you want, what I would suggest is just get like a pack of flashcards, take those flashcards and write each rule on a different flashcard, because this is going to be the very first lesson and the most important lesson that we're going to refer to. And then when you get to the test, maybe in 5-6 weeks, now you may forget some of these concepts. So what I would suggest is each night, have 10 flashcards. Just run through the 10 flashcards. Really try to stay up on memorizing these. But other than that, these are the different rules that you're going to have to recall. So let's just take like a couple minute break, like 2-3 minutes. Just go grab a glass of water if you want. Go use the restroom. We're going to regroup in just a couple minutes, and then we're going to go do a bunch of practice problems on this. So go ahead, do that. We'll regroup at like 4:14 now. So maybe 4:16, 17, we'll regroup. So take a second to yourself. I will still be here for that time. So if you have any questions, feel free to just type them out, and I'll be more than happy to help. Someone said, will these slides be available afterwards? Absolutely. I sent this out to everyone. I could send it again. Let me grab the link. Okay, I just sent the link. That should work. Let me know if you guys got that. So someone said, is it grammatically correct to group more than 2 predicates using commas? For example, I ate pizza, drank water, and slept. Yes, so because a predicate is just going to be the action. So the action is really ate. So the action altogether is that you ate pizza, drank water, and slept. All of those things are the actions. So since you have a list, it's absolutely perfectly okay, but your whole predicate then is ate pizza, drank water, and slept. Someone also said, hi, I want to know if the material online is available to us even after the sessions. And yes, that's a great question. You can have access up to a year. So if you do, though, want it past a year, just feel free to reach out to me and I don't mind extending it. But yes, all the material is for your access for 365 days after you made the platform. All the videos will be there, practice problems, all of that. All right, so before we get started, I'm just going to launch a quick poll. How you guys think the class is going? If the stuff that we're going through is helpful or not, just feel free to, put it in. Let me know if it's helpful or just not helpful at all, just so we could keep an idea of, how the material is going, as well as if you think that the material is not helpful and there's other things that you really want to learn in the class, absolutely feel free to, let us know, just so we make sure that all the material is very helpful for you guys. Then after this, we'll jump back into more questions. All right, perfect. So that's good to see. About 11 people said that it's very helpful. Others said that it's moderately helpful. So everything thinks that it's, generally helpful. So that's definitely awesome. However, as we're going, again, like I said, if there's anything that you think would escalate the class that you were hoping that we would go through, make sure you let me know of that, just so we can make sure to integrate that into future lessons too. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's jump back into material. We're going to do some practice problems in regards to these punctuation things now. So let's go ahead and let's give this practice problem a try. All right, so I just relaunched the poll. Let me know what you guys are thinking for this practice problem. Now we got to kind of collaborate all our punctuation concepts together to understand this one. Awesome. So far, the answers are looking great. Okay, someone said the poll's not showing up for them. Again, if the poll doesn't show up for you, no big deal. Feel free to just message me your answer, or it doesn't really matter if you put in your answer or not, as long as you're, participating, paying attention. That's all that matters. So don't worry about it too much. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and that poll. A lot of you guys chose A, which is great. A couple chose B and C. So let's just double check why A would be correct and B and C would not be correct. So in this case here, we have two things that are going to be the same. This one here and this one here. Remember how we mentioned that a period and semicolon are identical for purposes of this exam. Sure, the semicolon has two complete sentences that relate. Period, two sentences do not have to relate, but they still both have two complete sentences. So considering that, these two are going to be out. Now, also to double check, from this point to this point here, it's not a complete sentence. So to counter the rise of fast food and fast life is not a complete sentence. Now, if let's say you thought, well, maybe it is a complete sentence, how do I know? Again, double check that subject and predicate. So what is going to be our subject and what is going to be our predicate? So maybe we're talking about fast food and fast life, but what is actually going on with that? I don't have any subject there. So considering that, that's out. And also C would be out as well. Because remember, the rule for a colon is I need a complete sentence on both sides. So if I have a complete sentence on both sides, then a complete sentence on the first side, explanation on the second side, then I would not be able to have either one of these as my correct answer. So then that takes this as our correct answer, but just to double check why, because this is additional information. We are introducing, so this is our introductory phrase. So since we have the introductory phrase and we're introducing it later, concepts in the sentence, that is why A would be perfect. So great job on that one. Seemed like that one went really well for me, so most of you. Okay, let's try a couple more. Let's see. Okay, so this one's actually pretty challenging, but it seems like you guys are doing pretty well with this. So I just want to give it a shot, see what you guys think. I'll relaunch the poll again. Just try your best. Just keep in mind the rules that we went over. So this one's I'm kind of getting answers all across the board. So just make sure as you're running through it, recognize what are the two punctuations that are the same. Semicolon, double check, do I have a complete sentence on both sides? Also double check the semicolon rules, the colon rules, things like that. It's really what I'm looking out for a question like this. All right, so it looks like we got a lot of B's and D's for our answer. So let's take a look at this. Let's see which one's correct. Okay, so our correct answer here is going to be D. So if you chose that, awesome, great job there. Now, if you chose B though, that means that you looked over the rule, a period is equal to a semicolon. Remember, both of them are going to be equal to one another because both have the same rule. They have a rule that it's a complete sentence and then that punctuation, both period and semicolon, and then a complete sentence to follow. So considering that, both of these right off the bat are not my correct answer because one has a period, one has a semicolon. So like I mentioned before, that's like saying like 5, 5, 6, and 7 are our correct answers. Well, 5 and 5, you can't have two correct answers on the test. So since you can't have two correct answers on the test, automatically cross those out. Now, if you argued, well, but I thought it was a complete sentence before, I thought it was a complete sentence after, so why can't it be both of them? Well, simply because it's not going to be a complete sentence on both sides. Now, the reason is, notice how we have this word if. Remember when we have the word if, a huge red flag should also go off because we have that rule of if this happens, that happens. Same like when we had a previous question where we said, because this happens, that happens. Or when this happens, that happens. It creates that two-part sentence. So that's what's going on here. If the employees have this happen, then that is going to happen. So it's an if-then statement. So considering that, that's why we're going to go with D, because I need to have the comma to separate that dependent-independent structure. So I know this one is a little bit more challenging just because it seems like I have two complete sentences on both sides. So you're really inclined to pick that B or sometimes even the A there. But just make sure that you keep that noted, that this main rule is what we're referring to. That main rule is, since you're having a period and semicolon interchangeable with one another, I automatically can cross those out. All right, let me know if you guys have any questions on this, because this one was definitely a little bit more challenging, but just wanted to give it a shot just so you could challenge yourselves. Now, also the questions that I have up here, these are taken from actual previous practice tests. Actually, not even practice tests, actual previous SAT exams. So if you're feeling comfortable with these and you're getting the questions right, that's awesome, because that's showing me that you're understanding the material. You're going to be able to adapt it to the actual test. But if you're feeling a little uneasy about these concepts, it might tell you, hey, go back to that, Prep for Success online platform, log on, run through some practice problems, maybe do a couple practice tests as well, just to help you get a better idea of these concepts. All right, so let's just do a couple more. Let's see, so this we had correct answers D. Let's see. Oh, here's another relatively difficult one that combines all concepts. So let's give this one a shot. Let's give it a try. I'll make it big for you guys too. Okay, let's give that one a shot. So far, looks like we're getting a lot of answers for B. I'll give you guys like 30 more seconds though. Let me know if you agree with that or not. Okay, awesome. Looks like most of you voted it now. All right, so let's take a look. Most of you guys chose B, which is awesome because B would be the correct answer. So let's take a look at why. So, here, pen. Okay, so the first and foremost thing is let's take a look at the colon. So let's just go through A, kind of work our way through. So A would not be good because notice a period would mean that I need a complete sentence on both sides, which is great. But now a colon here means that I need to have a complete sentence before that colon. So in this case, it was thick with. Is that a complete sentence? What do you guys think? It was thick with. Awesome, perfect. So a bunch of you guys are saying no. So right away, if you know that it's not a complete sentence, then here A is out. However, remember, what's the same thing? What's the same punctuation as a colon? Anyone remember that? Perfect, M dash. So notice, look at A and C. A and C are looking pretty much the same because we have a colon and a dash. Dash, same rule. It needs to have a complete sentence before it, explanation after it. So C, I could cross out too. Now I'm just down to two. I'm down to B and D. One is a colon, one is a comma. So let's take a look at B. B would need a complete sentence before, explanation after. So starting here, we got just weeks after the scientists added the nitrates and phosphates, the water in Lake 227 turned bright green. Okay, so now you kind of question, why did it turn bright green? Let me get that explanation since I have the colon. And it says it was thick with the same type of algae blooms that had plagued Lake Erie. So here I have my complete sentence, which I fulfilled. Then I have my colon and I have my explanation, which I'd fulfilled as well. So far, B is looking very good. Now, after that, now we have D, which is a comma. So remember, that is the comma splice. The comma splice would not work because when I have a complete sentence, and then I have a comma and then another complete sentence, that is never going to be good. So right there, I could cross that out. Keep in mind that comma splice, again, I'll recall that just because it is something very important. It comes up in almost every exam. The comma splice is when you have a complete sentence, comma, and another complete sentence, and that is never correct. So just keep that in mind. All right, perfect. So again, that was a little bit more difficult, but definitely challenging topic to take a look at. All right, so let's see. Let's take a look at our time. Okay, we have time for a little bit more. So let's do. Right, so how are you guys feeling with this? You want a couple more practice problems or move on to another topic? How are you guys feeling here? More practice problems? Okay, perfect. All right, so then we'll do a couple more practice problems. So let's give this one a shot. Well, relaunch the poll. Give you guys another 2 minutes or so, and feel free to practice this one. Right, so far the answers are looking great for this one. I'll give you guys a couple more minutes or seconds. Okay, looks like mostly everyone voted in. All right, so everyone's looking like D for this, and D would be absolutely perfect. So a big red flag that should go off is essentially we have another one of the dashes right here in the sentence. So when you have a dash, having another dash is sometimes helpful if you have additional information in between those dashes. Now, what better way to check additional information rather than take out that information in the sentence and see if it works? So let me go ahead and do that. Let me pretend that there's a dash here, and let me take out everything in between. So now I could say, in addition to supervillains, the new, soon-to-be iconic characters of the age had to cope with mundane, real-life problems, including paying rent, dealing with family squabbles, and facing anger, loneliness, and ostracism. Notice how that works perfect. So that's how you know that it is additional information, which is why D could be your correct answer for that one. Someone said, and someone said, sorry to ask this, but don't feel bad asking. That's the whole point of, being in this class. I'm sure so many people have the same question as you. So let's see. So we said, I'm still getting a bit confused on to use a colon versus a dash and vice versa. Could you review the rules, or do you have any tips to remember? Yeah, absolutely. So a colon would be if everything after the colon is additional information. So for example, let's say you chose a colon for this one. Then that means at this point, you need to take every single thing from this point forward and deem all of this additional information. However, notice the additional information ends at this point. How do we know that? Simply because of the fact that my sentence doesn't end here. If I say, in addition to supervillains, the new soon-to-be iconic characters of the age. Okay, the soon-to-be iconic characters do what? I didn't even have an action there. I didn't even have a verb. So notice the rule of the colon is it has to have a complete sentence, and then it needs to have a colon, and then it has an explanation. But here I don't have a complete sentence before it, which is why a colon would not be correct. But in this case, the M dash would be perfect because it closes the M dash here. We have two M dashes, and then everything in between the M dashes, that is what is the additional information. So that's why in this case, we could have the dash rather than the colon, because the colon, everything after is additional information, but the dashes, it's just whatever is inside the dashes. So essentially from Spider-Man to them, that is declared as additional information. So then someone said, let me move this to the question. If there was no M dash, would it still work? And does the explanation have to be a complete sentence in order to use a colon? Okay, so for the first question, if there was no M dash, would it still work? So not sure of the question, but let me try and answer it. If not, feel free to have a follow-up. But by no M dash, did you mean no M dash here in the original? For example, if there was no M dash here, then we still could not use a colon here because everything after is not additional. So if there was no M dash, we would still have to show somehow that this here is additional information. So we would either need to put like parentheses around this. We would need to put 2 commas around this. We would need to put some information to show that this here is the only additional part. If I were to use the colon, then the colon shows that it doesn't stop at this. We continue with the additional information. But remember, I need a complete sentence. And this would not be a complete sentence if I put the colon there, because I would just say, in addition to supervillains, which that's just an introductory phrase, so that gets crossed out. The new soon-to-be iconic characters of the age, that right there, that whole entire thing is my subject. So now I have my subject. Now what's my predicate? What are these iconic superheroes doing, or characters doing? Well, they're having to cope with mundane real-life problems. So now this here, that's my predicate. So if I put a colon here, then that would deem this everything else after additional information. But I don't want to do that because I don't then have a predicate in my complete sentence. So to answer your question there, if there was no M dash, there would still need to be some type of punctuation to show that it's additional information. Anytime you have additional information, there needs to be punctuation around it, whether it's an M dash on both sides, comma on both sides, or something. It still needs to have that additional information on both sides. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to message a follow-up. And then there was one other question that when it comes to M dash, if it's only one, does it usually, is it usually in the beginning? Or can it be one at the end? And okay, so let's see. So the first question was, if there was no M dash, would it still work? Answered that one. Then we said, does the explanation have to be a complete sentence in order to use the colon? No, it doesn't have to. Because remember, going back to, actually, I'll show you a couple examples that we went through before. Remember how we had all those different types of examples here, where we said, like, my favorite colors are the following: blue, green, and pink. Notice here, blue, green, and pink, not a complete sentence, but it's still correct, because notice all these are correct examples. Same with here, he got what he worked for, colon, a promotion. A promotion, that's not a complete sentence, but it still works. Same with you know what to do, practice. Practice is only one word, not a complete sentence, but it's still a correct example. The only one that had a complete sentence was this one here, and it still works just because it simply follows the rule of a complete sentence and an explanation. So the only rule for a colon is a complete sentence explanation. It has nothing to do with a complete sentence on the next side, because as we mentioned, the second side can be any structure after the colon. It could be a fragment, complete sentence, a list, a definition, doesn't matter the structure. as long as it's a complete sentence, colon, and then some type of explanation. So hopefully that answers that question. And then we got one more follow-up question. We got, when it comes to M dash, if it's only one, does it usually in the beginning, or can it be only one at the end? So I'm not exactly positive on what that question is asking. For the person that asked that, any way that you could, I'll message you as well. Can you reword your question by any chance? Since it is private, I don't want to, call out to the person that mentioned that, but I do want to help you in regards to that question, but I'm not exactly sure what it's asking. What I got out of it is, when it comes to M dash, if it's just one of them, do you need to have another one at the end of the sentence? And not necessarily, because as we mentioned, you could just have it where it replaces a colon, where you have a period at the end of the sentence. So you have your complete sentence, you have your M dash, and then you have your additional information, and then you have your period at the end of the sentence. So hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to reword it. And then we got to, in regards to M dashes, there usually aren't as many on the SATs. So they are absolutely fair game. So I just got a question here asking, are they not as common on the SAT? And as we, took a look at it here, there's a bunch of practice problems. Like here, this is a practice problem taken from one of the tests. It has an M dash. Here's another one. Well, that one doesn't have an M dash. We took a look at the other one. This one has an M dash. This one has an M dash. This one has an M dash. So actually, out of the 6 random examples here that I took from random SATs, about 4 out of the 6 of them do have the M dashes. So it is pretty common. So make sure that you still study everything that I run through here. It definitely is a fair game for the test. Now, obviously, it's going to be less common than, let's say, like a comma. Commas come up maybe 3-4 questions out of the exam. You might get 1 question on M dashes. So if you're trying to weigh of what's more important or less important, I would definitely say the M dashes are on the lesser important in terms of punctuation, but all of punctuation is super important. So I would suggest to try and make sure that you understand them all. Yeah, someone said that they didn't even know that they should be studying them. Yes, it's kind of like a hidden thing that a lot of times people don't know is even on the test. And as we run through some of these things, you will find some more things that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that was on the test. But it's definitely important to kind of run through those concepts just so we could go through, because as we get to this test, you'll see that something that's super, super, super important is something that's simply just called problem recognition. So the problem recognition is when you get to a question, recognizing, hey, what even type of question is this asking? Because on the test, it's only going to ask, there's only about 10 different topics. So for example, punctuation, that's one of them. We're gonna go over next class, some like pronoun agreement, some apostrophes, that's another topic. Wordiness or redundancy is a topic, subject-verb agreement, verb tense, parallel structure, modifiers, sentence order, things like that. There's only about 10 different ones. So if you can master and make sure that you remember those like 10 different things and the strategies that come along with them, you can master this test. And that's what we want to try to help you do. We want to try and help you master the fact that when you get to a question, let's say for this one that you see on your screen, obviously we know it's punctuation, but for something else that maybe you're unsure what it's testing, then you might be inclined to just go based off of what sounds good. You might read the sentence and say like, oh, okay, this sounds good, so let me just go with this answer. But instead of that, we really want to kind of train you to say, all right, I'm going to take this question and I'm going to say, what category does it fall into? Once you recognize the category that it falls into, then you could go ahead and answer it based off of the strategies that we learned there. Someone said, for the SAT courses, are we doing English on Mondays and then math on Wednesdays? or whenever we finish English, we start math? Oh, good question. So Mondays is always going to be our English, and then Wednesdays is going to be our math. So I highly encourage you guys to come to both classes. We're going to do both with that. Now for the English, we're just starting off with the verbal side of things in terms of the English rather than the reading, because the reading just takes extra practice more so. There's not too many like content things. Sure, there's some tips, tricks, strategies, which we're definitely going to go through that in a couple lessons in the future. But right now we're mainly focusing on the language arts section, simply just because of the fact that that's the section that you're able to improve the most in, because there's actual rules. So for example, like if you take these 6 common rules or these MDAS rules and you apply them to the test, you can master that portion of the exam. Rather than the reading, each reading passage is slightly different. There's slightly different topics. There's slightly different things to look out for based off of each individual passage. So it changes so much that it's a little bit harder to higher your score for that section. Now, for the actual schools, they don't care where you get your verbal points. You just get a total score out of 800. So with that being said, you get 400 points for the language arts, 400 points for the reading. So if you master and get 400 points, let's say for the language arts, but you get less on the reading and it averages out, it doesn't really matter. Sure, we want to try to get them both up as high as possible, but the one that we want to start with is the one that you could raise your score the most. Then on Wednesdays, you guys are going to go through the math topics. Now, you guys, if you want to get a head start on that, you could use the online learning platform, help you guys run through that a little bit more. But I do want to take a couple minutes as we're, kind of running through some of these topics, just because people asked. I want to show you guys how you could practice a little bit more on these topics. Now, I know obviously I gave you the Prep for Success online class, which is absolutely pertinent. I think that's very, very important to do because it does help you understand the concepts a little bit more. But once you feel that you're ready for some practice testing, if you go on Google and you literally just type in SAT practice test and then put any number after it. Let's just say practice test 3. Whoops, spelled that wrong, but you guys get the point. Practice test, you'll see the very first link. You'll go ahead and click on that. It'll give you actual practice tests. These are tests that have previously been used prior. So you'll see here that we have like a reading passage. So the first one, you're going to have a reading test. It's 65 minutes for 52 questions. It's a pretty fast pace, but it's something that a lot of students don't finish, but we're going to work on that in a couple weeks. So learn some tips and tricks for that section. You're going to read through this passage, and then you're going to have questions associated with it. These are going to be more like main idea questions, or like what do these words mean in the passage, things like that are going to be this section. You're going to have 5 passages of that. So pretty fast pace, but you're going to have that section. Now after that, right after that section, you're going to go into the writing and language test. This is what we're focusing on now. So the writing language test, you're going to have 35 minutes for 44 questions, and you are going to have a passage to the left-hand side, and you're going to have these sections that are underlined. Essentially exactly what we were doing today. These were excerpts from these tests. So you're going to take this and you're going to line it up, number 1, and then pick the best possible one that lines up with that answer. And number 2, this one that lines up, and so on and so forth. Now after that, then section 3, you're going to jump into the math. So I know we're not doing math today, but just to kind of give you guys a quick idea, you're first going to have the math test, which is a no calculator section. No calculator is going to be 25 minutes, 20 questions. So it's a pretty fast-paced section. Then after that, you will have the opportunity to use your calculator in section 4. So if you do not have a calculator, I would start thinking about that now, just so you could have that prepared. If you're not sure what calculators are allowed, you could just look on the College Board website and they'll let you know of that. But this section is a little bit more lengthy, 55 minutes, 38 questions. So, so this is going to be all about the math. Someone asked, am I teaching the math portion? No, you're going to have another instructor for that. His name is Camille. He's going to be working with you through the math. I predominantly focus on the language arts and reading just because I've actually scored perfect on that section. So we want to put the best person in front of you for all the topics. So I've scored perfect on that. I focus on that. I also help students with personal statements and their essays and grammar and all of those things. So if you guys ever need help with that, don't hesitate to reach out. I love helping my students, whether it's in the class or out of the class. So definitely, reach out to me for that. And then for the math portion, the instructor Camille, he's scored perfect on the math for the ECT and SAT as well. So definitely want to put the best person in front of you for that too. So any questions for the math, definitely shoot them in his direction. Any questions for the verbal, send them in my direction. But he'll be the person that will be teaching you guys for that. So this is just kind of a little bit more about this section. Now, one more thing is there is an essay section on this test as well. I advise you guys to take a look and see if you're taking that essay section. Next week, I will take a poll to see if you guys are taking that, to see if it would be worthwhile to spend time in class to review the essay section. The essay, it is an optional section. Optional just means that some schools recommend it, some schools require it, and some schools do not want it at all. So I would suggest taking a look at the schools that you are looking to apply, see if they require that essay section. So then in a week or two, when I have that poll open asking, who's taking the essay, you guys are aware of if you're taking it or not. The reason why they say that it's optional is because some people, or some schools, I should say, don't need it because they don't care to look at it. Some like to just have it, just to have an additional thing. Someone said, if I email you, will you be the one to receive it? Yes. So that email that I gave at the very beginning comes to myself as well as to other instructor Camille. So feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions, any concerns. Feel free to email that directly. I will. You guys are asking for the email, so let me just mention it to everyone. So it's prep for success tutors@gmail.com. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out to that. If I don't get back to you in like 48 hours, feel free to just send a follow-up. It does get busy with a lot of the students, especially since so many things are online. There are so many questions with, how do I do this? How do I do that? So if I don't get back to you right away, just give it a little bit of time and I'll, be more than welcome to reach back out and help you out with any of that. But yeah, absolutely feel free to reach out to that, and I don't mind helping. And then in regards to next week, or actually not next week, next class, you will be using the same exact link. I will send a reminder just to let you guys know, but exactly how you logged on to class for today, that's exactly how you're going to log on to class for Wednesday. You'll be going to the same exact link. You're going to click that link, and then you'll be joined in with the math instructor, Camille. He's going to help you run through all of that. But other than that, that's pretty much all that I had for today. I will stick around just till the end of class, just in case you guys have any additional questions. Again, I don't mind helping out, but let me know if you have any questions. And on that note, feel free to head out, and I will see you guys next Monday. And again, it was a pleasure to teach you guys all today. I know it was online. I know it's a little bit weird, a little bit different from usual, but I appreciate all the participation. Someone said, can you share the slides with us? Absolutely. I did send it out earlier. Just give me one moment and I'll send it out again. I see some questions coming in. Just give me 1 second. I'll address that in a second. I just want to send out the link for this. Okay, so I just sent that. Then, Hi, I did get that email. Okay, so then we said, although this isn't related, but for the science and history portions of the SAT, do you think it's more of the info is in the text rather than synthesizing it, if that makes any sense? So for the science section, it depends. If you're talking about if you're talking about the exact like SAT subject test, that you need to know prior knowledge for. It's not going to be in the text. Only the like reading ones will be in the actual text. However, if you're looking at the science and history portions, you will need to know prior knowledge for that because that's exactly what they're testing. It's kind of like the AP exams where they're testing, do you understand the material? Now for talking about the reading part. Oh, so for the reading part, absolutely everything is going to be in the text. You're not going to need to know prior knowledge for anything within the reading section. So if you're talking about just like the science and history passages within the reading, that is all going to be directly in the text. Now, it might not say exactly word by word what is in the text. Like maybe in the answer choice, it's talking about grains, and then in the passage, it talks about bread. But you can infer that bread and grain is the same thing. So then you can answer your question. So it's not going to be verbatim, like word by word, what is in the text, but all of your answers, you will be actually able to even highlight a direct line and answer your question based off of that. Okay, perfect. Glad that I answered your question. If you have any other questions, let me know and I don't mind helping. But we'll definitely go over that too. We'll, go into all like the tips, tricks of the reading section. We'll probably do that in maybe like 2 or 3 weeks time. Diane, it looks like you're the last one left, but I did get your message. It's wonderful that you're able to, get a lot out of from this class. If you guys do have any questions outside of it, though, feel free to let me know. But yeah, M dashes are kind of like a weird concept. Same with colons. They're typically things that you don't learn in class in school, but somehow they sneak them onto the SAT, and that's with a lot of concepts on the SAT. For some reason, they don't teach it in school, but then they expect everyone to know it on the SAT. So hopefully, you'll learn a lot in the class along the way. But if there's anything that maybe I don't touch on that you are curious about, always feel free to email, let me know, and I'll definitely try and integrate that within class. Right. Bye-bye. Have a great day.